Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Secrets of a Witch podcast with me, Sabrina Scott, where I talk all about life, love, relationships, healing, trauma, spirituality, witchcraft, magic, tarot, feminine energy, divination, and everything in between. And for this episode, I am going to be sharing some vignettes, I guess, from my experience at Podcamp Toronto, which was so much fun, and I found out about it by accident. If you're not perusing the Eventbrite in your city looking for random shit to do, I highly, highly recommend it. I would not have known about it otherwise. And I have so many things that I learned, as well as just inspirational thoughts, things that I started thinking kind of on my own, obviously, as a bit of a response to the stimuli of the event. So, today, what I want to talk about in regards to PodCamp is lesson, a lesson which I feel like, as someone who's been to a bazillion trillion conferences, for those of you who don't know, I am just finishing up my PhD, and during the tail end of my undergrad and throughout the 3 years of my master's, as well as the first few years of my PhD, I spent a considerable amount of time attending conferences. And so it's been a while since I was at one. So it was actually super, super nice to have that opportunity to be in a school environment again and just to be in rooms of people teaching and eager to learn and spending their weekends doing something involving learning of their own volition. Like no one's getting a cookie, no one's getting school credit, no one's being paid to be there, but everyone's just there to learn and to participate and to grow. And I fucking love that vibe. And so, what I want to talk about today is that some of the most interesting conversations happen in the hallways. The interesting conversations happen often in the margins. So, I don't know if you guys know this, as a part of my master's, I have a diploma in environmental and sustainability education. Obviously, this was done by the education department at my master's granting university. For those of you who don't know, I've got a master's in environmental studies. And my master's was specifically about witchcraft and magic as a form of environmental education. If you're curious about that, you can read my first book, which is called Witch Body. It's a graphic novel. But anyway, as a result of all of this learning on education, an idea that I wanted to just bring to you guys today is the idea of the implicit curriculum versus the explicit curriculum. So within a conference environment, the explicit curriculum is the sessions, right? It's like session one on blah, 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 session two on this other topic. And that is what is being taught, so to speak. Right. But the implicit curriculum, the stuff that you kind of just learn by being there, you learn, let's say, for instance, like the discipline of waking up early, showing up at the thing, choosing which session you want to go to, et cetera, et cetera. And there's also a lot of education and value to be found in between the rooms, in between the sessions. And one of the things I enjoyed the most, actually, um, there were so many sessions I wanted to go to that I actually didn't get to go to some of the sessions that I was most excited about because in the moment, I felt pulled to either stay where I was or listen to someone I had never heard of speak because it seemed intriguing, et cetera, et cetera. And so actually the people whose talks I was originally most dead set on going to, I actually didn't attend. But this is where the fun part comes in, is I actually met them by accident in the hallway or just like in the back of rooms. And so when I originally met them, I actually did not know who they were. And so this actually, I think, ended up being great Because sometimes when you've got this idea of who someone is and they're on a pedestal or whatever, whatever, you're gonna act a bit like weird or kind of like fan-ish about it, even if you don't intend to. Sometimes you can bring that energy with you to these conversations. And since I didn't know who these people were, they're just like random ass people I've met in like the back of the room or in the hallway or whatever. And then when I actually found out, like, oh, you gave a talk I really wanted to go to. That's so awesome. Can I get your slides? Can I ask you a few questions about that? And the interactions are so much more heartfelt and genuine because it's coming from, interestingly, a place of ignorance. And I kind of love that. And I would highly encourage that. Like, don't put anyone on a pedestal. I intentionally did not actually look up anyone that was speaking at this conference. So when I had showed up, I did not know who speakers were and who was just a random attendee who was maybe, I don't know, a student or just someone who wanted to make a podcast but hadn't made one yet. Like, I did not know. And so you get to kind of treat everyone same, like I would do that anyway, to be honest. But some folks, it's harder to do that same thing when you do come in with that prior knowledge. Obviously, sometimes we can't avoid having that prior knowledge. We just have it and we can maneuver accordingly. But I do find that if you are someone who is, let's say, on a pedestal, folks often do approach you sometimes with weirdness or like they want something from you or this or that. And I've experienced that myself whenever I've been, I don't know, the center of attention at a conference or some kind of thing. And the people who I often get on the best with at these events that I speak at are people who just treat me like a normal person, who are not like, oh my God, it's so and so from the internet, and wow, I'm like so like shocked right now. And I have had people have that reaction to me, and that's totally cool. Like, I'm not bothered by it whatsoever at all, to be honest. Like, it's a compliment if anything, and I'm grateful for that. At the same time, like, it can be a lot easier to make genuine connections when no one knows who anyone is, which I realize sounds kind of crazy. And it brings me back to when I was okay, so my first graphic novel, Witch Body, back when it came out, it was nominated for the biggest comic book award series in Canada. And the person, I don't know if he was the founder of it, but one of the incredibly famous comics people, um, who basically is kind of in charge of running this, has a really big role in it. When I met him at the after party for the awards ceremony, one thing I really appreciated about him is he introduced himself to me and he allowed me to introduce myself. He did not assume that I already knew who he was, even though obviously we knew who each other were. We were just on stage together for a moment. But I really appreciated that he had this very low-key vibe about him. He had no arrogance. It wasn't like, of course, you know who I am, blah, blah, blah. And of course, I know who you are. It wasn't like that. It was we were allowed to interact with each other as equals on our own terms. And I really thought that was fantastic. And I'm remembering that moment all these years later. And I believe that since he did that, it allowed the conversation and the connections to flow with so much less friction and anxiety or intimidation that it might have happened otherwise, right? So this guy's like a veteran of the industry. So of course, that's the vibe. And that's actually something else I've really noticed, whether it's in the comic space, the podcasting space, or any other industry space, is the older folks in the room, as I said in a previous episode, the gray-haired, older, grizzled folks in the room are coming with so much expertise. And what I love about them is they have this peacefulness about them where they're so secure in their knowledge and what they know, what they've accomplished, that they are just completely chill for the most part. Like, I fucking think that's amazing. And so get curious about those folks, I would say, and the conversations that are going to happen in between sessions. What I've learned somewhat is that I would rather miss, let's say, 5 minutes of a session to go pee rather than miss out on the really interesting delightful conversation that happens in between sessions. And so, if anyone listening to this is like coming late to one of my sessions in the future, go ahead. That's totally cool. I will not be offended whatsoever. It's all good because those conversations can be so fruitful. And one of the folks I found most memorable from this conference was actually a gentleman who was not a presenter, but was friends with some of the presenters. And to my eye, seemed like by far the oldest individual at the conference. And every time he said something, I was so intrigued and found it so useful, so thoughtful, such an interesting perspective on podcasting and on life. And this person was not a speaker. And so it might be really tempting whenever you attend a conference to just go congregate around the speakers. And that's totally cool. And there's going to be interesting folks that are not presenting, or that maybe have presented and you just don't know that, who are going to have some interesting things to say. And those conversations between the in between liminal spaces can be so valuable. And it was actually that cluster of three older gentlemen that inspired me to skip one of the sessions that I was really excited about to listen to one of them speak. So I was like, okay, these three guys are sticking together and they all seem really intriguing and insightful. And they're staying for this session because one of them is speaking. I should probably stay. And you know what? I'm glad I did. And it was originally the session that was the least interesting sounding to me. It was like, I forget what it was called. It was like the death of podcasting or something. And I was like, why do I want to hear that? It sounds so fucking depressing. But I decided to stay because this older dude who was like in his 80s or something was going to stay. And I was like, okay, if this is interesting to these people who are interesting, clearly there's something to be learned here. And it ended up being, even though there was only maybe four of us in the audience, it ended up being one of the most intriguing sessions because what he was really talking about, and I think he branded his session completely incorrectly, which is another topic, but those of us who needed to be there were there. And what he was talking about was podcasting as, in a way, like an art of conversation, the art of speech, the art of telling a story. And why can't that be a form of creative expression? Why can't that be an art? And what I really loved about his perspective was it seemed to me, and he didn't use these words, but it seemed to me very much like podcaster as auteur, podcaster as zinester. And obviously, me coming from comics and publishing and visual art and books, basically, of course, within the comic space, we do have that kind of head-butting that happens between the people where, there's like 10 people working on a comic. The writer, the pencils, the letterer, the inker, the colors person, the designer, you've got all these people working on a book. And to be honest, those are the comics I don't like. If there's 10 people working on one book, and I don't just mean like the editor and the production, I don't mean that. I mean on the art itself. For me, that work always falls flat. It's not for me, it's not my thing. I'm not saying those people aren't talented, they absolutely are, but it's not for me. The work that I love is work that is all created by one person, where one person does the writing, the pencils, the inks, the color if there's color. I don't usually really like color comics at all, the lettering, the everything. One person is putting their perspective and their fingerprint on every single aspect of that book. That is the work that I love the most. And I consider that to be authorship in comics. And so I think that word is kind of borrowed from film, but for me, it makes sense. It makes sense even more for comics than for something like film. Not that it's a competition. I think it can be applied to really any art form or any creative expression. But and then of course there's zines, right? Like the DIY photocopy culture, like anti-establishment, not in it to make money, just there to get out of perspective. And so that I didn't realize it, but of course it does. That perspective, that mindset, that way of producing exists obviously within podcasting as well. And then you get the on the complete flip side, the big gigantic media companies that are releasing quote unquote podcasts, but it really is just a radio show by another name. And I found that incredibly interesting to see this beautiful dichotomy between the DIY and the corporate. And I love that there was space within the conference for both the DIY and the corporate. I just found that super interesting to think about podcasting through that lens. So obviously, what I do here is on the more DIY side of things, even though I am running a business. I don't edit, I don't splice in sound effects or a song or anything like that. I just hit record. I don't script either. I just hit record, babble, stop babbling, hit stop, and then upload. Like it really is as simple as that. And that is actually one of the things that I tried to express in some of the sessions for so many people who just seem to be hand wringing over, I want to make a podcast. I've wanted to make one for years, but blah, 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 all these excuses. And like, I get it. I get it. I also had made excuses in the past, but it's not that fucking hard. You know what I mean? It's not rocket science. Like, we're not doing brain surgery here. Like, all you have to do is hit record and then hit stop and then upload it. Like, boom, done. Basically, that is the bare bones of what this thing is. It doesn't have to be overcomplicated. And I've seen this in so many different areas of life, right? I've seen this within illustration and art when I was a professor at the biggest, I would say, the best art institution in the country. And I remember students asking, like, what kind of paint should I buy? What kind of brush should I buy? And I was always like, it doesn't fucking matter, dude. Like, get something, fuck around with it. Once you get good enough, maybe then buy the expensive one. But right now, it doesn't fucking matter. You're not good enough. Just practice. Just do it. Just paint. Do the work, you know? It doesn't matter. Like, don't spend 5 hours deciding which paintbrush to buy. Just choose one. It's not rocket science. Just do it, get there. A lot of people use this kind of tech stuff or whatever to enable their procrastination and lack of action, which, as we all know, I'm not a fan of that. And of course, I see that within the witchcraft space too. People are asking me, oh, what candle do I need? Like, what does my altar need to be? And like, of course, we can spend a lot of time talking about, okay, and even in my Magic Without Bullshit course, I have an entire module on candles and different types of candles. So you can get really into the nitty-gritty and into the weeds about what kind of candle is good to use under what circumstance. And yeah, there is always going to be a better one. But is your ritual going to flop because you used, I don't know, like a wooden wick instead of um, a cotton wick encircled by wax? Like, no, still going to do what it needs to do, most likely. And a lot of people just want to get all the witchy tools. They want to get everything set up before actually just getting to do their first ritual. You don't need to do that. And I think the same is true for podcasting, right? A lot of people are like, oh, I need to buy the right mic. I need to buy the right headphones. I need to have the right audio editing software. You don't need any of that shit. You just need your fucking phone, really. That's what I'm recording this with right now. Could the audio be better on my podcast? Like, maybe, probably. Do I particularly care right now? No. Maybe I will care about that in 5 years, 10 years, but right now, I know that what's most important is just getting it out there. And I know that if I buy like 20 microphones or whatever, that is going to create friction that is going to lead to me not giving a shit anymore. And I would rather just pump this out and get my ideas out and get this, I don't know, I was going to say wisdom. Is that too highbrow? Get these thoughts out for y'all to just kind of sit with and hang out with and, take what resonates and then leave the rest. I would rather just get it out there than spending a bunch of hours hand-wringing about what microphone to buy. Like, it doesn't fucking matter. I think a lot of people focus more on production quality and all of the bells and whistles than on actually having something of consequence to say. And I've seen that in every industry that I've been in. And I do think, as people often say, content is king. If the quality is good, it doesn't matter if you recorded it on your iPhone in your bed, just audio with no like funky theme song. It won't matter. I have never been disappointed by a lack of theme song in a podcast, you know? Like I've never been like, oh, I can't listen to that podcast. There's no theme song. There's no fun jingle, I'm out. I've never said that. And so if you're thinking that you want to make a podcast and you're listening to me babble right now, like just fucking do it. It's not that hard. Take like, I don't know, 3 hours this weekend, this week, whatever, and just figure it out. And my homework for you is record an episode and upload it. It's not that hard. It doesn't have to be perfect. You can delete it later if you don't like it. Take action. Take action. I have a lot more to say about PodCamp, obviously, but that's maybe where I want to leave it for now. I don't want to exhaust you guys too much all in one go, although, of course, some of these episodes do tend to be longer than others. But yeah, there's some interesting dichotomies happening at the event, which I really did like. Like it was all ages. There were little students, then there were people who were much older. I love that. That's amazing. Great conversations happening in between sessions in hallways. Some of my, again, my most memorable conversations that were the most useful and helpful for me happened by accident in the hallways or just in between, you know, non-pretentious, chill conversations. Very, very interesting. I love that there's people who were super corporate there and also like, little rinky-dink mom and pop type of folks. I love that there's both. Both are important. Both are valid. Both are needed, actually. I thought that was really cool. Another conversation, maybe I am just going to keep babbling. Another conversation that was happening was this question of video. You know, should all podcasts have video or not? And this is something I've thought about, obviously, right? Like I have a YouTube, I do video content at times, like I do YouTube live sometimes, I do Instagram live sometimes. Of course, I have this podcast, which is purely audio. And interestingly, like I don't want to do this podcast on video because I feel like if it's audio, I can just fully focus on what it is I have to say without having to worry about what my face is doing. Do I have to look pretty? Do I have to stare at the fucking screen so I don't look like I'm, staring off into the left, staring off upwards into the right, daydreaming? Because whenever I'm recording this, I do kind of look like I'm daydreaming. I'm looking all over the place. I'm usually lounging. I'm sure I have like I don't know, I don't look presentable when I'm recording these, like pretty much ever. And I think that is why I've been able to record so many episodes is I don't have to be on camera. For me, that would be an impediment to recording more episodes. And I also think that the quality would of what I have to say would be different. Like whenever I'm performing, let's say, or being present for a camera, I am paying attention to both my voice and what I look like. It's two different things to pay attention to. I have to do more prep work to put on makeup, look cute, blah, blah, blah. But with this, I can focus 100% on my intonation, on the rhythm of my voice, on the words that are coming out of my mouth and the argument or the point I'm trying to make. And so I do like both forms of content, obviously. I just see them as very different. And so it was really interesting to have a bunch of presentations at PodCamp as well contradict each other. I love that. I think that's so important. There was one presentation that was talking about how video and YouTube is actually the biggest way that people discover podcasts these days. And then you had another presentation basically say that that's complete bullshit and it's just research that is paid for by YouTube, basically, or like companies that own YouTube. I don't really know all the details of that shit, don't particularly care. But anyway, the argument was like, oh, well, that's all skewed data because of this. And that very well could be true. I have no idea. And so there are different ways that people are approaching this problem, of video. And so I think there was like three different presentations about this kind of. One was about the Canadian podcast consumer, very interesting. Another one was Video Do I Gotta, which I think was by this American guy from Boston, which was a really, really interesting talk, actually. And one of the themes that he was talking about was this difference between what did he call it? Audio primes and video primes. And so, as he was describing it, there's people who primarily consume podcasts on audio, and there's people who primarily consume on video. And it's usually the two extremes. People are usually one or the other, from what I took from what he was saying. And another insight that he had on this was that people watch a video when they have the time and when they want to pay more attention. And I think that's true. Whenever I am listening to podcasts, it's because I'm doing something I can multitask. I'm doing something physical. I'm walking, I'm commuting. I am doing, I don't know, the dishes. I am cooking. I am doing laundry. I am cleaning. I am feeding the cats. I am making coffee. Like I have the brain power to pay attention, but I don't have the eyeballs to pay attention. And so if I was going to describe which one am I think I probably would be the audio native. I don't actually watch a ton of video content unless it's an interview between two people who I really, really, really respect and would want to see speak. But it was interesting. It was interesting. And so his takeaway was like, do I gotta? And his answer was like, no, not really. But having some kind of video content helps. And so I found that really intriguing. It was an intriguing series of talks. And so if anyone is considering attending next year, I would say fucking do it. It was really, really a good time. And I would say most folks I encountered were really charitable in terms of their spirit and their energy and their positivity and encouragement. And there's something magical happening. Because it's true, like oftentimes people do and can have ego, and be a bit like, I'm too good for you, I'm too good for this conversation. And like that can happen for sure. And I did encounter one person like that. It's gonna happen. No worries, it's all good. I'm not offended. It's cool. Um, but there is something magical when a conference is like not too small and it's also not too big. And I feel like this conference was pretty much that perfect midway point. Like I pretty much could recognize everyone that was there, even though I didn't talk to everyone. So like there was this beautiful magic that can happen when you have this like nice sweet spot of volume. It's not too many, it's not too few. And I really think it just like hit the notes, it hit the notes. And I'll probably have more to say. I did take some notes, obviously, during the day one. I actually didn't take any notes for day two, other than in a few private conversations, which were about nothing to do with podcasting. But I'm sure I'll have more to say. It was a really great time. I had a great experience. And I'm really thankful to everyone who made it possible. The organizers often it's like they're the unsung heroes, right? It's like they don't get enough appreciation for what they do. It's thankless, grueling, often boring work to organize something. There's a reason that I don't fucking organize in-person events. That's the reason. And props to them, they killed it. And so if you are someone who has an interest in podcasting, do check it out next year. I think it's like every year in Toronto thing, which I think is great. Okay, that's it from me for now. If you guys have any questions about what I learned, or if you have any specific questions about podcasting, I'm happy to make an episode of it. I had no idea that like 200 episodes is a big deal. Like I was like something I learned. Yeah, I did not know. Like I did not know. So I guess I'm a podcaster now. That's something I learned over the weekend at Podcamp was I guess I'm a podcaster. I guess I probably know something about doing this now that it's been a few years and 200 episodes basically. Um, yeah, it was shocking to learn that. I was like, oh. Because there were so many people there who hadn't started yet or who had maybe like somewhere between 10 and 100 episodes. And it didn't occur to me that like 200 episodes is something I should particularly be, I don't know, giving myself props about. But there you go. I guess props to me, 200 episodes. I think the episode after this will be 200. Super excited for that. Yeah, who knows what that one will be about? Maybe a recap of all the episodes I've done so far, some statistics maybe on which topics tend to be the most popular among listeners, and also for me recording. That could be interesting. And if you guys have any requests of something you would really love to hear me talk about, please send it my way. I'm more than happy to oblige by babbling on this podcast about what you would like to hear. Okay, friends, that's it for now. I hope you have a wonderful day. You can find me at sabrinamscott.com. Of course, my Instagram, Sabrina M. Scott, my YouTube, Sabrina Scott. And if you guys don't know, I actually read tarot cards and do mentorship and coaching on various things. So if you need a creativity coach or a coach around your spirituality and your personal wellness practice, if you feel like your life is in shambles and you would like to have an outside perspective help you get more in touch with you and your own personal authenticity, if you're ready to completely transform your life for the better, I am your person. So please do be in touch. My website is sabrinamscott.com, and I will talk to y'all very soon. Much love. Bye.